go. Now I should be here. Put on all the volumes and stuff. So, hello, anyone who has shown up so far. Today, I'm celebrating the release of the Warzone miniature game. Would it be like 4th or 5th edition now? Yes, actually. It's back. And I've got my box. I still haven't really unpacked it. I will, and I'll make a video. I will take that video, but I also have a video of me packing some previous Warzone stuff I ordered from Prince August. But today we're celebrating by me reading some of the stories from Mutant Chronicles 1st edition books. There were some flavor texts in them, and I did actually do a recording of them, but I didn't like it, so yeah, so I thought I'd read it live instead, just for funsies. So strap back. In the description is telling you which order I read the books. And I'll start with the Brotherhood. Here we go. Tired. Lars Goftman screamed for mercy. Long, thin steel needle bit into the soft part of his elbow, buried itself with his arm, setting his nerves afire. In his entire life, he had never known such horrible, excruciating pain. Unlike the sharp flick of a knife, it was over in an instant. Seemed to go on forever and Lars screamed again and fought helplessly against the leather straps that held him rough, naked, sharply inclined aluminum table. Every one of his muscles strained uselessly to move and to remove the thing that had invaded his nerve. Tears streamed uncontrollably down the mask of pain that was his face. Then he stopped short as he began coughing up blood. He wanted to vomit, but didn't think he had the strength to contain it. The needle was slowly withdrawn, and every inch that it traveled through his flesh was a wail of agony. He strained against it again, more by pointless instinct than through any hope of freedom. When the instrument finally left him, Lars's muscles finally gave, turned bloody. He was weak as a newborn kitten. He mewed hoarsely as if, God damn it, can people stop writing me just as I'm doing this? Sorry about that. He was as weak as a newborn kitten. He mewed hoarsely, as if to himself. He tried to curl up into a ball, but the straps restrained him. What was that? asked Lars opened his eyes slowly. The operating light overhead shone directly at his restricting pupil and prevented him from seeing anything. Head, shoulder, the black-robed inquisitor. Blood from his racking coughs spattered redly across his torturer's face, and his tall heat. He hadn't bothered to wipe it away. The Inquisitor repeated his demand again, voice muffled. It sounded like that, and this was an unforgiving foe. Lars simply whimpered softly to himself. His throat scratched raw from screaming. He found it almost too painful to talk. The Inquisitor raised his gloved hand to Lars' face. The needle, still covered with Lars's crimson fluid, jutted out index finger. Tears ran down Lars's face again, mercifully blurring his vision. What do you want? Lars cried. Anything. Sorry. Anything. I'll tell you anything. Oh, what I want. The voice was almost soft. Give it to me, son, and the pain will end. By the Cardinal's message. The Inquisitor's eyes glared out from behind his helmet and bored into Lars's mouth. They were the only part of his face covered, and they were the worst things Lars had seen. The Inquisitor's costume had been designed to intimidate those in trial, Lars knew, but no part of it was nearly as cold, dark, a man with what life there was in those eyes, waned only with the flowing and ebbing of Lars's own pain. He couldn't bear the eyes anymore. Lars began rattling off names, one after the other. As each one left his mouth, he felt as if he'd spat rotten. Something once useful to him, cracked and broken, only a source of throbbing. Were any of them heretics? No. Nor at this point did he care. All that mattered was turning off his eyes. When Lars had finished, the visitor looked questioning over his shoulder, timid. Had been transcribing Lars's confusion. The frail, white-faced young man nodded too sharply to indicate that he had recorded it all. Lars looked up at the Inquisitor hopefully. He'd done as he had been asked. Would the pain stop now? His eyes feebly asked. One quick motion. He grabbed a scalpel from the operating tray beside the aluminum table and slit Lars's. While Lars's blood gurgled out of him, the visitor muttered a blessing, parting soul, and turned to leave, beckoning the young missionary to follow after. The novitiate, transfixed by the sight of Lars's death, stuttered, "Inquisitor, you promised to set him free!" Knowing that the young man couldn't see it, the Inquisitor smiled again, the delicious glow of life returning. "So I did, son. But if you feel that I misled him..." The Inquisitor paused for a dead-hand moment, savored the boy's sheer terror. For a liar. The Inquisitor turned back to gaze upon Lars, now still turning once again to leave the cold, dark chamber. Swiftly, body behind. What then? So was he? Well, that's one hell of a start. Brotherhood. Ooh, sit back, everyone. Grab something to drink. I'm having myself a beer because it's Friday. And then a good death. Lieutenant Walter Bosniak surveyed the field of destruction before him. Shots were ringing all around the place. Artillery shells exploded off him. He stood amongst it all, entirely unaffected. He knew it was not yet his time to die. He and his sacred warrior had put up a good fight, but Algoroth's Nepharites had simply known the surrounding jungle much better than Brotherhood intelligence built was. Those blasted necromutants, supported by wave after wave of those half-living, half-dead undead legionnaires. It looked like the Dark Soul had taken this. It was time for the warriors to cut their losses. Just as Bosnia gave the order to pull out, a message came in over. The private with the communications rig handed the headpiece to Boss, and he slipped it on his burning ears, microphones sliding into place before his lips. Yes, said with dread in his voice. He had seen the battle plan. He knew what was coming. He listened intently to the man on the other end of the line and nodded slowly to himself as he mutely absorbed. It was Colonel Walsh, once Boss's mentor, now his direct superior. At that moment, he was signing a death warrant for Boss. Battle had gone badly all along the line. Apparently, almost all of the Brotherhood units were preparing to. Vision needed someone to stay behind and keep the Dark Legion occupied, while the rest of the soldiers made good their escape. Located at the vanguard of the Inquisition's wedge, Oz and his men had been elected. Farewell, son, Colonel Ross, his voice rough, threat. Oz knew it was one of the hardest things the man had ever had. A shell detonated off in the distance, destroying a communications relay tower. Before Boz could reply, and when he tore off the headset and threw it to the ground, he wouldn't be needing it from here on out. Then he cleared his throat and shouted for the sacred warriors to gather around. Dark Legion's forces had temporarily fallen back to the group, turn in scant moments. In the meantime, Lieutenant Bosniak tell his people that they had been selected. All right, soldiers, words come down from above that this operation has hit the fan. The rest of our forces are pulling out. It's our job to stay behind and buy them the time they need. He looked out at the long-haired, helmetless men and women around him. Each of them hung on his every word. Some wore an expression of disbelief. Other faces showed only sheer determination. I won't lie to you. Most of us, probably all of us, won't be walking away from them. But because we choose to stay, our brethren will be able to get away, come back to fight these abominations another day. We all knew it might come to this someday. I can't say I'm not sorry it has. There's only one thing left for us to do, soldiers, and that's to sell our lives as dearly as we can. He raised his Avenger's sword high above his head and issued a battle cry. For the Cardinal! For the Brotherhood! For humanity itself! A astounding response leapt up from those around him, and then they turned and assumed their final positions, to them choosing plot of ground on which they would die as the fading sunlight glinted off their holy armor. Bosniak watched them taking up their stations without a moment's hesitation, with them knowing that all that waited them at the end of the day was death. Heart fell with their good. So much heroics going on here. That's very typical of the Brotherhood. The reason why I chose this order of reading is mostly because that is how they were published, at least in Sweden. I don't know how it was abroad. I know that Mutant Chronicles was released in popular, and then it was released. It's kind of an interesting choice for games back then. Is it abroad first? we go. So, on to the third story. A hard lesson. Long wooden rods smashed into the side of Wallace's head, sent him spinning. He rolled over onto his back in a moment. Head hurt awful, and his vision was blurred. He had a Before he could get up, a second blow poked him. He thought he felt one of them give way. He rolled away from his attacker as quickly as he could, until he nudged into the wall. With a burst of effort that made his head spin, he leapt to his feet and assumed a defensive position. Trudeau was watching him, wooden pole resting comfortably in her hands. Wallace shook his head to clear his vision. It seemed to work, although it felt like his brain was rattling around loose in his skull. His Brotherhood martial arts training sessions were brutal. Wallace touched his ribs. Trudeau laughed once before her expression turned serious. "You've a lot to learn yet, young man," she said. "When you're hit, you move. You stay still to nurse your wounds. You just provide your opponent with a better target. That's the kind of mistake you only get to make." Wallace tried to take a deep breath, and pain stabbed through his side where the blow had landed. He called for time, and just before he collapsed to a sitting position on the floor, Trudeau was with him in an instant. She placed one hand on his side, the other on the goose egg that was already forming over his left temple. As she closed her eyes and concentrated, a warm glow appeared on her, ran down through her hands and onto the places where Wallace had. Glow felt good, and Wallace suddenly realized pain had gone away. He started to thank her, but she stood up and waved him, walking off to the other side of the room. "You are my student. It is my responsibility to teach you. You can only learn from lessons you can recover from. The quicker, the better. I believe I have learned mine," offered Wallace. She snapped around to face him, her eyes full of discerning fire. "Have you?" she asked. "I wonder. Sometimes I wonder why I waste my time." Wallace staggered to his feet, still a bit woozy from the after. "Come on. I'll get better. Just starting out. Weren't you ever young once? Do you ever make a mistake?" Look crossed over Trudeau's face, one Wallace had never seen before. She gazed at him slowly, and bent over, pulled up the left leg of her loose training robe. A long, vicious scar and the length of her shapely up past her until it disappeared in her height up. Wallace, a low whistle. "I got this when I was your age," he said, "in a fight." "How come you never had the scar removed? Modern medicine have leg look like?" "Because it reminds me of a hard-won lesson. Same sort of lesson I'm trying to teach. And it's a lesson I don't ever intend to forget. I have many scars. I have lessons hard way, and I would like to pass them on to others. It's up to you how hard the..." Right then, Wallace decided to try for the... Okay, there was a weird end to it. The Brotherhood has their own combat skill called the Brotherhood Martial. Damage. Martial arts, woo! Silly thing. Expected many RPGs during the 80s, 90s. Anyways, carry on. Yes. Having a drink. Takes on my throat to do this. Through confessions, Atman Moideen had much of his mind that he felt the need. Just yesterday, an old friend of his had revealed to him that he was a member of a secret society dedicated to the undermining of the Brotherhood. How such a person could have risen so high in the ranks of Mishima, Moideen could not. It was his duty to support it. Knelt in the cathedral, waited for an opening of one of the confessionals. He knew that his heart was pure. Would the Cardinal's brethren be able to see his vision, to see into his soul, to know that he was not guilty simply by vision? Dearly hoped that this would be so. Elsewise, he held no hope. Suddenly, there was a hand on his shoulder. He looked up, saw a missionary motioning toward a confession. Time had finally. He stood up, determined to take whatever medicine his confessor might prescribe. Entered into the tiny wooden cubicle, sat down on low wooden. Soundproofing covered the ceiling and walls, all except separated him. Could see the outline, Professor's head through the screen, but could not make out her feet. He hoped that the same was true of her vision of him. Quickly and efficiently, Moideen described yesterday's encounter in entirety, leaving out no detail. Professor grew serious, asking questions, each of which he tried to answer as he could. When it was over, Moideen felt immeasurably better. He had handled the situation well as he thought could be done. Felt deservedly proud of himself. When he got up to leave, though, he found that he was locked in. Suddenly, fear made a home in his heart. "Don't be frightened, my son," said the confessor in a soothing voice. "The Inquisition would simply like to ask you before you leave." The Inquisition. Moideen had come here specifically to avoid having anything to do with their kind. Like most citizens, faithful to the Cardinal or not, Moideen had a healthy horror vision. The rumors of their methods and their unforgiving methods struck terror into most people's hearts. Moideen believed them with all his heart. He turned and tried the knob again. He started to pound on the door, on the walls. He knew the soundproof keep hearing. Just as he was about to turn his attention to the screen, slid aside, hit a nerve inquisitor, hits off of the question. He screamed and screamed, but outside in the cathedral's chamber, unheard a thing. I'm starting to realize, rose-tinted glasses and everything. Back when I played the game in the 90s, everything sounded so damn cool because everything was extreme and ultra and blah blah blah. But this is like silly in a way and not how I'm supposed to think. Anyways, we're almost halfway through. A hot story Botany Al-Karim, fingers flew across his manual typewriter. Thick fingers pounding the keys, shaping the words that would make the story of the Daily Chronicle ever told. Al-Karim had spent the last several months of life working undercover at Cybertronic Megacorp. Had finally gathered enough facts to blow the lid right off of one of Cybertronic's major secrets. Years the world had wondered how come Megacorp's employee never worried about any sort of incursion, Dark Legion, and in tomorrow's paper they were going to find out. He had talked it over with his editor, and this thing was going to get front page coverage, the biggest headline the Chronicle had run since the last Cardinal had assumed the throne. He knew that this was his ticket to instant notoriety, one he'd been working for all his life. Just hoped the Inquisition wouldn't dump on it just this way. He was so intently working on the story that he didn't even hear the pair from the Cell of Intelligence got behind him. When the woman spoke, almost leaped out of his pants. He spun about, and there they were. A woman, dressed in the pseudo-uniforms official revisor had worn the Brotherhood's founding. Dark blue business suits and instantly polarizing glasses. Those people, it would have looked like any corporate security type. But Al-Karim knew better. They had their identification cards out. Scanned them. Looked real. Will you come with us, sir? We'd like to ask you some questions about your story, said the woman. Anne remained stony-faced and mute. A gentle smile played across the woman's face. It's okay. It's just that you managed to get some really important people interested in research, and they'd like to get the whole story straight from the man who... She smiled at him again, and Al-Karim smiled back. Sure, he said, standing up quickly, grabbing his coat, gathering his notes. He wanted to make sure he got all his facts straight. Brought in questioning before, and he knew these people appreciated getting it right the first time. As he strode out of the elevator and toward the Chronicle's entrance, Al-Karim with a revisor on, he joked, "Do you guys do this sort of thing often? You're kind of pushy for a first date." Neither revisor or tough crowd, said mostly to himself. It would be the last words he'd ever say. The trio burst out onto the streets and turned towards the cathedral, 3 blocks. As they waited for the light, a large, bald-headed man around and drew a flamethrower from beneath his long raincoat. The revisors went for their guns. By the time they had drawn them, before he had a chance to scream, Al-Karim was engulfed in fire. The assassin only got 2 steps. Revisors opened fire. One of their bullets caught the fuse. He went up in an even larger column, one that was destroying Al-Karim. Woman revisor looked at her partner, a grimace on her face, and said, "Going to hell of a time. This one." Yeah, that was... A fun side note though. Infiltrating Cybertronic? Yeah, nah. It's not that simple, but this was written way before they actually had hammered down Cybertronic how it worked. We'll get to it. It will be the final book then. It will be a long read, probably another day. But we'll see how far I get now. We've gone about half an hour and I'm almost done with the first thing. There's a lot of stories in this. Rogue Inquisitor. Me? Professor Ralston stumbled into the Gibson Cathedral and collapsed on the floor of the great chamber. The Cardinal! Cried. It's the Cardinal here! A pair of young missionaries spotted him and hauled him into a private room behind the great chamber. One of them went for the Cardinal while the other stayed behind and went to the first room. Suddenly Ralston revived. The fever of the infection that was running through him breaking. He sat up and cried out for the Cardinal again, then fell back onto the couch on which he was sitting. And he spotted the frightened young missionary bending over him with a damp cloth pressed against his forehead. Alston reached up, grabbed the boy's arm, and clenched him in a vice-like grip. It took most of his strength to pain. You, he said through teeth gritted with superhuman effort. You must listen to me. I don't have long to live. Frank went to summon him, the boy sputtered. He had never seen someone die before. From the look of the man who was holding him, hurting him, he was sure he was only moments away from his first time. He tried to wrench his arms away, but the revisor refused to let go. No, he said. You can't leave me. You must listen. The boy slowly nodded and ceased his struggles. The revisor tentatively relaxed his grip, and he let go entirely as his body was racking by a horrible coughing. He stopped. His lips were red. A trickle of blood ran down his chin, one corner of it. The revisor wiped his chin again. It's Primus. It sounded as if his lungs were filling with fluid. He's still alive. You understand, boy? He's still alive. He's out there, in the jungle, over 300 miles up Rio Muerte. It's unbelievable. He's gone rogue. Become the greatest blasphemy I've ever seen. His eyes were wide open. So much so that the boy feared they might fall out of his head. He managed to take control of a group of heretic legionaries, and he's forced them to do his bidding, to build that thing, that awful, horrible thing. The revisor's voice was becoming thicker by the moment. The boy was sure he didn't have too longer to. Ralston bent over and vomited black blood onto the chamber floor. Still bent over, he continued. Primus building himself a dark cathedral. What little strength he had left him, Ralston turned over and back up. Steadied himself by holding onto the boy's arms. With one last final effort, let out what come all this way to say. Don't you understand? He set himself up as a mockery of all we hold dear. He's become a dark cardinal, and he's not stopped. He'll bring his army down and destroy us. Destroy us all. Ralston's eyes rolled back into him. He pitched forward on him. Pain from smacking his head on the stone floor momentarily brought him. He must be stopped, whispered through his death rattle. He must be stopped. And this, like many of the side stories, tie into the scenario that not all of them did have them. This one does. Remember, if whatever the name of the character was, Batty. But here we go. Up here. Nowhere to run. Arnold Malcolm running for his life. A former street preacher for the mission. Malcolm had been seducted to serve the Dark Apostle of Ilion, had gone over to the other side and been a double agent of the Dark Mistress. Somehow, no idea how, had all seemed perfect. The Inquisition had. Now they were going to make him pay, possibly with his life. Malcolm dashed down the crowded street, knocking over trash cans, vendors' cars, shouldering and elbowing pedestrians aside. Far behind him, he could hear the shots being fired from the crowd's warning shot, telling the people to move out of the way, to get down. They were followed by several screams, and the screeching tires of dozens of cars braking to a halt. A bullet whizzed past Malcolm's shoulder. He glanced back and saw the Inquisitors coming on full steam, the formerly protective crowd having parted before them, revealing the sprinting Malcolm, who suddenly felt extremely naked. He spotted an open doorway up ahead, turned into. Instantly, he knew he had made a mistake. But what else could he have done? If he'd stayed on the street, they'd have had him. Better to take his chances in the building, no matter how slim they might be. Or better, alternative. What was in the book for Scrum? Malcolm took the nearest stairs 3 at a time, making for the roof several stories above. Suddenly, he heard the sound of the building's main entrance blown to. It was followed soon after by another set of explosions that shook the place to completion. Oh yeah, create a new method to pass between floors. Malcolm cursed, something he never would have done in faithful Brotherhood. Bar had fallen. He realized he should have taken refuge in one of the Megacorp's office buildings. And they would have had to wait and call for permission to. They simply hadn't had the time. They had eliminated that option. If he had just been able to make it to the Cybertronic headquarters, I'd never have caught him. Still, no use for such thoughts now. It was too late. The Inquisition never failed. At least, or that they told anyone about. Malcolm kept pounding up the stairs, floor after floor. 40 flights later, started to run out of breath. There was no way he could keep this pace for very long. The life of a missionary just wasn't that physically demanding. You could hear the explosions continuing below, regular as clockwork. Visitors made their way from the floor. He decided that he'd had enough of the stairs. Opened the doorway, staggered into an office area. Off to his left, saw windows looking out into the streets from. Ropes writhed along the surface of the late cloud. For a moment, Malcolm stood there, trying to figure out what they were for. While he was standing there dumbfounded, a portion of the ceiling between him and the window suddenly disappeared in a fiery bang out of dust. His ears were ringing so loudly he couldn't hear the Inquisitor dropping through the hole in the floor in front of him, but he saw her as she stepped out of the billowing cloud of dust seemed to slide gently off the Inquisitor's, almost as if she was attuned to such mundane things. Yet, tubes from her power stabilizers were growing the residue of art. But Malcolm didn't notice most of these things. He only saw the barrel of her Punisher directed at his Arnold Malcolm. The Inquisitor's voice was muffled behind her helmet. Malcolm knew that her use of his name was not a yes? The Inquisitor stepped forward and pistol-whipped him with her heavy gun. Malcolm collapsed in the house of God. He looked down at him, conscious or under arrest. Those was. There's a once more. There's a thing here that wasn't really defined back then, but yes, it happens. Brotherhood followers do fall from night, especially to Ilian, Semi, or the more fitting ones for him. Especially a missionary would be Semi. So, the next story. A new calling. Oh, I need to drink my throat is getting sore. I haven't spoken much today, so my throat is not new. A new calling. The hallway was dark and probably should have alerted from off. Instead, simply ignored any warning sign might have kept his eyes focused back of the beautiful young woman leading him in the building. He had met Kara on the street last week, and she had stood there and preached Cardinal's words for 2 whole hours. Francis had been impressed. It wasn't too often that people stopped and listened to him speak for longer than 15 minutes. Let's 120. And he decided to take a break. He had still been there. He had sat with him, asked him all sorts of things about the Brotherhood. Apparently, she was thinking about becoming a missionary herself. She claimed to have been a follower of the Cardinal all her life. She was just now beginning to think that she might be hearing his call. Sure, which vocation would fight for her, but as she had few marketable skills, she thought maybe she would join the mission and see how things went. Francis had found her conversation, her beauty, stimulating. He had been disappointed when she finally said that she had letting take care of her mother, who had been confined to their apartment. But if his heart fell when it jumped twice as high when she returned the day. On for most of the but Kara finally and publicly her decision to become a missionary. Afterward, she begged Francis to come home with her, bringing the joyous news of her mother. He had respectfully agreed. So here he was, his way further and further up dimly lit stairs, reached the 13th. Kara turned back and smiled at him as they made the lap and walked down the hallway. Apartment. There was a gleam of something in her eyes as she unlocked, held it open for the companion. Francis' excitement. He stepped into the apartment and saw that it was and he heard the door close behind him and a lock slip into it. He turned to ask Kara what was. Before he could open his mouth, he suddenly felt her. For a moment, he bonded. Then he remembered himself far away. Then he could see her eyes glowing redly. I'll show you the way out at night. It's better in the dark. She cackled loudly. Francis felt a part of himself attracted to her, but he pushed it down, the recesses of his soul. Then he remembered the book, resting in the holster on his hip. Say about it. He didn't have to look it up. You instinctively that this was beyond his ability to handle this situation. He had to get out of here now. Started for the door, but tripped over something and tumbled to the ground. Tara was on top of him immediately, her fetid breath making him want to vomit. He cursed her and the darkness, refuting them both and staying true to his. Didn't know it then. Would have been graceful that he was blinded by the dark. It didn't allow him to see the creature Kara had transformed into, but instead of giving thanks for the lack of light, screamed. Oops. Is a twisted thing, and it lurks everywhere. As I feel right now, I haven't gotten that as far as I hoped. I'll probably just read this book and get back to continuing to the next one. Following, I don't know. On to the next story, The Exorcist. Exorcist Rico strode into the tiny interrogation room and, as per his training, immediately assessed the scene. A young man lay trapped by punch-buckled leather restraints and aluminum vivisectionist. A white-hot light glaring down into his bulging, bloodshot eye. Behind the victim, Iyotake, with a number of surgical instruments. A young missionary over in the corner looked as if he was ready to lose his first meal of the day. Already the suspect's left arm had been laid open. He looked drawn, pale, but whether from pain, fear, or simply loss of blood, ear tracks covered the man's cheek, implying that maybe it was a combination of all three. The man finally spotted Reed. His pained look suddenly turned to a sneer. Yotake had been right to call him one. His talents would be required here if he was to get anywhere with the subject. Iko greeted Iyotake, ignoring the young missionary cowering in the corner. He looked down at the subject again and noticed how the flesh had been flayed from him. Why wasn't I called in sooner? Isn't it apparent that this man had been touched by darkness? Forgiveness, please, exorcist, the subject was a difficult one. First, I thought he was only being stubborn. I see that I was mistaken. Rico looked down at the man. No matter. One way or another, this will soon be resolved. Man had a gag in it. Rico removed it. Any last words, demon? He asked, the spirit that inhabited the man's body. The man responded with a string of curses that could have tarnished the Book of Laws' golden head. Rico responded by slapping him across the face. Kissed your host goodbye, spirit of darkness. Rico closed his eyes, began to concentrate upon the spell that would rip the parasitic entity out of the man's soul. While he was midway through, suddenly spit something hot onto Rico's face. Rico opened his eyes and looked down. Between his feet spotted the man's tongue. Rico cursed inwardly at having been so sloppy. He reached a hand out to the missionary, who was already bringing up the rubberized device that bent the man chewing the rest of his breath. The man saw it, he clenched his jaw and refused to let it in. Rico's fist smashed into the side of the head, so hard that he was momentarily stunned. Rico grabbed the man's jaws, pried them open with bare hands, and shoved the device in. Then he drew the rubber restraining strap around the man's head so that he couldn't spit the device out. Like savage, wiped the blood from his hand. This time, Bell proceeded uninterrupted. Soon, Rico felt the spirit shrivel up, so, and wither away into something less. Rico sighed deeply. Work here. Yes, so the exorcists are a part of the mystics, I believe. Might be others too. They are a part of the cell mystic. And honestly, I had forgotten that the dark soul actually possesses humans in a way. It tends to do way more damage if the people get possessed than being cosplaying the Exorcist. But here we go, that's an interesting story. Also, I find it hilarious that the Holy Book Brotherhood is called. Because in the Swedish version, it actually got a Latin name called the Codex Cardinalis, but I prefer more. Oh, sorry, I wasn't even finished with the story. My bad. He picked up the man's tongue and held it before his eyes. It was a wonder the man could see anything at all with the torrent of tears that were rushing out of him, grief and pain. But when he saw the amputated flesh, he began to moan loudly, soul-searing. Rico removed the device from the man's mouth and ordered him to be quiet. Then he placed the tip of the tongue back in its owner's mouth and began to concentrate again. Within moments, the man's tongue was repaired, that it was almost... He immediately began to use it to give the exorcist thanks for saving his poor, rotten soul. Rico nodded and muttered a blessing over the man. The job here was finished. As he turned to leave, he shot back over his shoulder at Erich. And get someone to look at that man's arm, would you? Wow, that was very flippant. That should have been his job anyway, everything. So, we are at the story. A long day. Ark Samuel had been following a heretic for several minutes. He was an elderly man, and you didn't see around too often anymore. Type that people in the old flicks would have called cramps. He had a kindly air. Anyone else seemed like a harmless old man. But Samuel, he, sir, trained in the art of medicine, was a part of the great darkness. Samuels wasn't sure what had tipped him off at first. Maybe it was the way the old man had looked askance at the cathedral, or how he hadn't bothered to cross the street, mystic, rolling along. Anyhow, it had been enough to set off Samuel's finely honed revisor's instinct. He had grabbed the mystic and had him scan for the present. They come up with a real fool. And so Samuels had thanked the mystic, gone tailing the man. Several blocks, the man had ducked into an underground station. Samuels almost lost him getting onto the train. He managed to squeeze on at the last second. The older man got off in the perimeter. 3 blocks up, turned left, and then entered an old apartment. Samuel stopped out front. He needed to assess the situation. Small building, made decrepit by age, possibly an old warehouse converted into living quarters. Each floor made up a single large apartment. Who knew what secrets the place? He could call for backup, but by the time it arrived, the old man was gone. Besides, he was probably just some old fogey dabbling with dark books, mostly. If he called in assistance on that kind of case, he'd get ribbed about it. Well, he decided to go at it alone. Entered the building and stopped to listen. Heard a set of footsteps. Stairwell. He padded up the steps after them, quietly as he could. Stopped. Samuels heard the sound of a key in a lock, then a door opening and closing. He tiptoed up to the third floor landing. Stopped and put his ear up next to the golden window. He couldn't hear a thing inside, soundproofing the door. He wavered for a second, then made a decision. He drew his Punisher from its shoulder holster, aimed it at the lock and fired. Then he shoved in the door with his shoulder, his gun at the ready. The man was standing across the large room, a shocked look on his face. 5 other people were sitting in a group of couches, standing in front of him. The place reeked of spilt blood and rotting food. One of the men on the couches a gun. Before he could use it, Samuel started firing. The man went down in a shower of blood without having squeezed off a shot. The others went for their weapons and Samuels kept firing. Most of the people either went down or dove for cover. One man in the center of the couches stood up and simply snarled. The man drew a weapon from beneath the couch. A sword-like thing Samuels recognized as a knife. Samuel stopped firing for a moment to get a good look at the man who was ignoring the bullets. Suddenly, the world seemed to shift sideways, and something was standing in the man's place. Like a small, skinny man, much smaller than the man it had. Skin was black and leathery. He could swear its eyes were softly glowing red. Creatures snarled at Samuels again and threw its vashd at him. Samuels hit the floor. The weapon sailed over his head and buried itself in the stairwell wall. He glanced back, saw the thing dislodge itself faster, zoom back across the room to return to the thing's hand. Samuels remembered the creature from his apprenticeship. He had heard many rumors of things, but never actually seen them. Most people, unfortunately, have the experience to survive it. Calistonian intrusion. Damn. It's going to be a long. I turned off and asked me a question. Apparently, my phone is getting dumb. Holy shit, this book has a lot of stories, doesn't it? We are getting to Who Watches Watcher. Well, before I start, I think I should change green. Brotherhood. Well, I think I might have forgotten the name of background music. Come back and bite me. So, who watches the Watcher? Michelle Winston had always enjoyed her job. Secret observer assigned to infiltrate Cybertronic's HQ. Feinberg. How could she forget? Cybertronic employees were cleaner than her brethren. That was possible. And even if they were up to something sneaky, As scuttlebutt had it, they certainly wouldn't be silly enough to be working on it in their headquarters, especially not in front of someone with as low a security clearance as her. At least that what she had. Now she wasn't so sure. She had learned something. As an observer was the definition of her job. But this was something Cybertronically had definitely not wanted her to see. She had been working in the Cybertronic building late one night, as her job as a janitor dictated. She had wandered by the office of Keith Wilshire, office's top executive. She had heard a voice inside and recognized it as Wilshire's. He was engaged in a heated conversation with someone he referred to Mr. Executive, Mr. Mannerheim, alternative. Apparently, Wilshire had discovered someone at the local Bauhaus HQ, a junior associate, and some sort of link to Cardinal Durand. Durand the First. Didn't believe her ears, so she stopped, listened more closely. It seemed that Mr. Wilshire was convinced that this man had captured, made to talk about his hidden past. The 19th executive did not seem to concur, but he apparently agreed to allow Wilshire to go ahead. As Wilshire's tone of voice turned gradually from desperate to convivial. Just as Winston felt the conversation was ending, he heard a noise behind her. He turned and saw that it was the Cybertronic security guard clearing his throat. She tried to use the art of manipulation on him. "You don't need to bother me," timbre to her voice. "I'm just cleaning up here. That's my job." A glazed look came over the guard's eye. "That's your job. You can run along now," he continued, motioning off behind him. "I'll just run along now," said. He turned. Winston blew out a deep breath. Almost couldn't believe it had worked. She couldn't depend on her little trick lasting for long. Cybertronic had safeguards against such things, like the miniature security camera embedded in his badge. Couldn't fool the people monitoring. Had to get out of there now. She ran to the elevators and pushed the button. It came, but it took so long she was afraid the guard would catch her before she could get on. She jumped inside it and ordered it to take her to the ground floor. As soon as the elevator started moving, she reached up and shattered the security camera. Then she climbed up on the railing around the middle of the walls, opened the hatch in the cars. Just as she cleared the top of the stopped. She was far above the ground floor. The monitors must have sounded the alarm. The car started to move upward, alarming speed. Looking around for a way to escape, Winston saw her only way out. Gauged the distance, her car, cables, next. Took a deep breath. She managed to grab onto the cable, but it was slippery. She began sliding downward fast, too fast. She desperately clung to it with her hand arms and wrapped her legs around it. Eventually, she began to slip. Grease on the cable prevented the friction becoming too much, but she knew she was going to have some beautiful blisters. This was all over. She let herself down as slowly as she could. Within minutes, she reached the ground. She stood on top of the elevator car, to which her cable was threw the piranha from its hiding within her now filthy powder blue jumpsuit. Cautiously, reached the hatch back, peered inside. No one was there. the car. The doors were open. She cocked her pistol, left it down. Like most places Cybertronic had been, not in. There were only 2 guards in the lobby. One of them had his gun drawn, the other was managing the communication station by the phone, probably calling for assistance. When Winston saw the man with the gun, she immediately fired. She'd never killed a person, but for a first-timer, she did a damn good job. The bullet crashed into the man's chest, sent him sprawling across the lobby floor. Guns rapport drew the mission of the god drew his weapon as well. Before he could bring it over the countertop, he was behind. Winston dropped him with a second shot, caught him in. Thinking the coast was clear, Winston dashed unprotected. Just as she reached him, a shot rang out from behind, and a bullet pierced her right shoulder, knocking her straight through a now shattered plate glass. An alarm started sounding somewhere. She turned to face her attacker. It was the man she had shot first. A dented steel plate showing where her bullet had torn through his. He was one of those blasted chasseurs. Her position, broken glass, Winston fired at the guard 3 more times, each shot knocking him further back till he finally stumbled and Winston got up, started running as fast as her cable-burned legs would carry her. She was outside now. She was free. All she had to do was make it to the cathedral. Spy stuff. Yeah, Cybertronic is a little bit more, how should we say, tougher than the regular human out there, because most of them are cyber. It's also difficult to infiltrate, and why they are very, very loyal company. Anyways, let's see. Oh, the stories here. Oh, take a shot. Cardinal Dominic was not normally a happy man, but today he was in a particularly mood. Things on Luna were not getting any better. On the contrary, they seemed to be continually degenerating. Capture and torture as many people as he could seemed to be little he could actually do about it. The great darkness appearing in busting head nearly everywhere, not just in the jungles of the rocky surface of Mars, all over Luna, out in the perimeters, in the industry ports, even deep in the mine shaft and underground tunnels, Luna's rocky core. And now, his clammy touch was even being felt here within his beloved body. It saddened him to think of things. No time for sorrow, no moments in which to pause and to keep pushing on, keep trying to make the system a better place for all of humanity, especially Cardinal. Right now had a mass to see, but he'd better start concentrating on that instead. Maths went well for the most part. It was the same standard fare that Dominic had heard and performed day after day, but it never failed to inspire him, to uplift his sagging spirits. He had come to his favorite part. He stepped up to the pulpit, cleared his throat in preparation of giving his sermon. Brothers and sisters, he began, as he always did, we are gathered here today to celebrate our unity of purpose under the guidance of the greatest leader of our time, Cardinal Nathaniel Duran 17. From there, Dominic segued into his standard. Forces of darkness were everywhere. all of humanity against them all times. Suddenly, just as he was getting to the best part, he heard someone coming up from behind him. He turned and saw one of his administrators racing towards him, screaming something he couldn't understand. He turned back to face the collected brethren up in a far corner of the great chamber. Saw a flash of light glint off something shiny. Just as he was trying to figure out what it was, the administrator tackled him from behind, cleanly bringing him to the ground. Just before his head hit the marble floor, Dominic heard a shot go off somewhere in the direction from which he had seen the glint, and his skull connected with a stone. For a moment, when he awoke, his head hurt badly. He realized he was covered in blood. It wasn't until he shrugged the administrator's body off his back he realized very little fluid was his own. The young man had taken the shot to him, a shot that would have, no doubt, ended his charmed existence. Surrounded by more administrators. One of them, Johnson, the commander, said, "Please stay still, sir. There's an exorcist on the way." Dominic ignored him, struggled to. "Don't be absurd," he grumbled. "I'm fine, thanks to this valorous young man." Got a look at the commander. "Little thanks to you." He looked at the crowd, men now circling him. "Have they got the assassin?" "Yes," said Johnson. "He's already in our custody." "Alive?" Surprised, Johnson nodded. "Good." Cardinal Luna cracked a smile. "I'll be wanting to question personally. I'll make sure of the arrangement, sir." "That you..." Dominic nodded. "Now, kindly have your people step aside. Important that the congregation see that Cardinal Dominic of Luna, the Sheriff of Luna, a crotchety old man, and I think that in the 3rd edition he actually calls the lead Brotherhood. The 1st edition hinted that he wants to be. He will never. Apparently he did. Continue the story then. Before they complied, Johnson removed his ceremonial robe and handed it to Dominic. "Better clean yourself up with this for me." "At a sight," Nick smiled. "All the better, don't you think, Commander? Public sees me standing here, covered with blood, yet healthy as can. It will only contribute to rumors of my immortality. Now, have your people move out of my way." Johnson motioned for his people to comply. They did without hesitation. As Dominic raised his arms to the congregation, a great cry went up. They began to pray loudly to the Cardinal in celebration of the great service of the... The reason why I might get stuck this is because I'm reading straight from this. Sometimes it looks like a net stop, but it's not. Oh my god, there's so many stories left. So, I am at the end of the book. We are now at in the book where the scenario would be. The Trinity, the Cardinal's private court, supposed to be sure. Could never be sure about such things. Said Cardinal Durand the 17th, originally known as Durand, met with his 2 brothers, Daniel and Peter. Same anonymous subterranean vault they always have such occasion. Its secret held up since Brotherhood's beginnings. Serve as well always. time for their semi-annual meeting anyway. But Peter had something others. Sure, he could have called an emergency meeting. Luckily, timing had been right. He hadn't been forced. After the greetings and small talk were over and they were gathered around the rough table center of the small cell, Peter leapt right to the business at hand. We have a problem. We have been made to understand this possible. Certain members of Cybertronic are possibly to our deception. Particularly, it seems that a man known as the executive interested in investigating claims that have been made truth, though he remains far from convinced that they are accurate. After all, he chuckled, came back his chair. We've been at this a while, and I think we've gotten pretty good at it. Xander, silent. Nathaniel, ever the sharpest of the three, immediately leapt to the box. You say concerns me, but I think we've all seen it coming for a long while. All we can do now is delay the inevitable. This will buy us some time in which to come up with some in the eventuality that the secret of our immortality is covered once and for all. Look Peter in the eyes. Know the situation. What do you suggest we do? Peter grinned. He already had a plan. Eliminate the investigation. He slowed it down for a short while by the selective removal of key personnel within the Cybertronic organization. I have a list of names. Alexander looked at his younger brother thoughtfully. Or, meaningfully, Peter winked at him, bearing a savage. You would need to put this to a vote. Asked Nathaniel. Rhetorical question. They all knew it. All right, Alexander. Good. Peter will provide you with his list. You'll get Crenshaw right away. Any questions? Hello. Of his younger brothers and... Oh, well done. In the meantime, I suggest we step up our propaganda campaign and investigations on Cybertronic. In this case, best defense might very well be great offense. If we can shut them down before they get too close, killed several birds with stone. Younger brothers both nodded their approval. Now, on to other business. Oh, we have a storyline going now. In the first edition, yeah, and I'm dropping a big spoiler here. The Cardinals were three brothers that had always run Brotherhood. No, broken line. They just had a ritual to rejuvenate and young again, and then start over their journey within the Brotherhood, and all they died, so to speak, and then got rejuvenated, and so they were always these brothers. Currently it's Nathaniel. In the third edition, this was changed a lot. The basic story was there, but I will not spoil it here. Brotherhood. Because the Brotherhood and Cybertronic have very important each other. Mission accomplished. Hold up here atop the Bauhaus headquarters, but Sebastian Crenshaw knew it was the advantage which to perform his latest assignment. A man in Cybertronic by the name of Miles Jabbar, and who the Cardinal decided. Crenshaw had no idea why this occurred a death, and he really didn't care. It was none of his business. Trusted the Cardinals. They never really had. Anyway, besides which, after having Mr. Jabbar under surveillance, Crenshaw didn't think he had trouble killing him. Jabbar was a slimy little. Just in case, both his activities, his sexual partner. Little Crenshaw had been permanent. Of course, then again, with a large portion of humanity, Jabbar had been singled out by the Cardinal. Crenshaw's only superior, by the courier. That didn't mean Crenshaw or Jabbar, but he had been waiting for Jabbar to apartment 60, Cybertronic building, just as he late, but Crenshaw wasn't hurried. He would bear the cold all night. His chicken would come home to enough. There he. And he had a child with him, a boy who couldn't have been 12. Crenshaw cursed. This was going to be difficult, especially since Jabbar had a cold bottle. He disappeared into his bedroom. Crenshaw wouldn't be able to reach him. He'd have to. This altitude, a real pain. Of course, things went as badly as possible. Jabbar only spent a few minutes in the living room. Every other night, relaxed there for an hour watching the news. The child was between him and the window almost the entire time. The bedroom, couldn't see him at all. Crenshaw cursed again, more heartily this time. Slung his Mephisto over his back, then he reached into his backpack, drew a small crossbow with a coil of cable at it. He drove a piton to the roof, attached the loose end of the cable to make sure it would. With careful aim at the roof of the building kitty corner from the Bauhaus queue. It was shorter than the Bauhaus building, but not by too much. In fact, the new angle would give Crenshaw a perfect shot. Jabbar's bedroom. Fired the bolt and flew straight and true, burying itself deep within the roof dome's surface. Brought out the handcuff, hung it over the line. With a quick prayer, Crenshaw lowered himself over the edge, building to the handcuff of the brain. He slid down to the other rooftop, seeing his speed, but he jammed the brake at the last second, came to an acceptable stop. New buildings. Carefully bent over and cut the cable, and tossed the bolt to a nearby steam chimney. One would ever find it. The steam covered Crenshaw's position beautifully. Slung his rifle, got to. Soon he had Jabbar within his. Just finished him, standing in the bedroom window, enjoying the view. Wind. Rifle's trigger. Bullet pierced Jabbar's window, smashed through his eye. The impact knocked out the back of his skull, fell over backward. Planning, always the key. Crenshaw thought to himself, mission accomplished. And this will be the final story. And this is about story about Primus. Final scenario of Primus. The book. So here we go. A problem of Rio Muerte. The meeting had been going on for some time when the issue of Inquisitor Primus finally came up. It was the great keeper of the art, Reinhold Walter, but it curious. It seemed that one of the Brotherhood's most promising inquisitors had rogue. Located some 300 miles at the Rio Muerte, Gibson Cathedral. Amos had somehow managed to take control of a sizable number of heretic legionaries, usually under the control of Semi, the Lord of Spite. Not only that, but he had set himself up their Dark Cardinal, using the legionary to build a Dark Cathedral. Cardinal Dominic first to respond. This man is an abomination. He still bore a bandage head from a blow he had sustained during a nation attack. Then say we send in the Archangel, bomb this blasphemer and his evil works and existence. There is no other solution for this guy. There were many rumors on the donut-shaped table. Most of them seemed to agree with the dreaded sheriff of Luna. Did not. Dang Wu spoke up for the dentist. I beg the Cardinal's pardon me, but I disagree. I do not think I am alone in my position. I looked around and received fewer nods than would have liked, but they were from the right people. It is my belief a great opportunity to learn something from each situation. For instance, just how did this gain control of it? Did the mage or twisted biotechnology change for him? Or did he somehow manage to wrest power over it? Why did this man become seduced by it? From what I understand of him, he was a model inquisitor up until this time. We might have been happy to have more just like him. Grinned, and a wave of soft laughter traveled around them. Obviously, this is not what we want, so we need to learn how it happened, so that in the future we might hope to prevent it. Dang Wu folded his hand himself and waited for a response. It was not long. Dominic's face already turned red by the time he managed. I cannot believe what I'm hearing, he sputtered. Should we waste time examining this crime, or should we simply call it what it is? A crime against all humanity, and punish it swiftly with all available force. I say we make an example of it. Such a thing shall work as more of a deterrent than your pointless research. Then the Cardinal himself spoke. His sneer quickly vanished from Dominic's face. Durand the 17th spoke softly, clearly. There was no doubt everyone in the room could hear him. Each hung every word. It is my careful considered that we should give Dang Wu's idea a chance. Discard it. He is correct. Such a thing has never before occurred. We seized the opportunity to learn from it. A serene smile appeared on Dang Wu. Of course, Cardinal commented, we cannot afford to have such a situation for long. If word of it were to get out, it could be quite demoralizing for Brethren. A nasty grin popped Dominic's. We will give Dang Wu's idea a single chance, allow the team to investigate. If they fail, the place shall be bombed as Dominic has suggested. He paused for a moment to collect himself. If they succeed, the place will be bombed as soon as they can leave. Cardinal Durand the 17th sat back in his chair and placed his hand on the table in front of him. That is all that shall be said. Okay. And that was the end of all the Brotherhoods. So, I'll be back another day to read more stories. What originally was the other splat. Next book up would be Capital. I think they have fewer stories though. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Right? A wonderful Friday. Bye-bye.